The sun started to rise over the sea and our ship, the Carnival Pride, as we headed into Glasgow, Scotland, and the Greenock Ocean Terminal, where the River Clyde meets the sea. A beautiful start to a beautiful day. Soon we'd be off on our first excursion of the cruise across the Scottish countryside to Stirling Castle.
And then we came out once again, and then we went into another, and that is the reason I'm fou. We had 6 Jock and Doris's, then sang a chorus. Just listen, I'll sing it to you.
For about an hour, our tour guide delighted us with local songs and stories as we headed into Stirling by motor coach. As we arrived in the area of the castle, the bus pulled aside so we could get our first glimpse of the well-fortified stronghold. I tried to imagine what attackers of the castle 1,000 years ago might have thought about the siege in front of them, standing exactly where I stood now. It must have been very daunting. We boarded the bus again, traveling to the hillside village of Stirling. Unicorn statues reminded me of the myths and legends of this magical place, steeped in history. Most often, the bus is allowed to drop visitors at the front of the castle, but due to a bicycle event, the parking lot was closed, resulting in about a quarter-mile hike up to the castle entrance. For some passengers with mobility issues, it was a very difficult and unexpected climb. From the gate of the castle, across the countryside, you can see the National Wallace Monument, celebrating the one and only William Wallace, a pivotal fighter during the Battle of Stirling Bridge. It was about this time we were told by the guide we'd only have maybe an hour or so inside, and then we'd be headed back to the ship, even though the tour description said we'd have time at the castle and in the village. Needless to say, many passengers were disappointed by the shortening of the excursion and later sought partial refunds at guest services. With the short time frame, I confirmed the meetup time and place and peeled off from our group as soon as I could to explore as much as I could, as fast as I could on my own. Stirling Castle is a scheduled ancient monument, a heritage asset that is afforded extra protection against both damage and unauthorized change. The castle is perfectly built for defense with cliffs on 3 sides. It reminds me of other fortified places I've visited on my travels, places like the Acropolis in Athens, Lindos in Rhodes, and the mesa strongholds of the Native Americans across the southwest of the United States. Even before this was Castle Hill, ancient peoples sought it out for refuge. In the valley below, the historic castle grounds have been conserved. You can almost imagine what it looked like and who enjoyed it over the centuries. I happened upon the area called the Queen's Garden. Still irritated by the shortening of the excursion, this was the place where I decided to set that aside and try to enjoy the diminishing minutes we had in this fascinating place. After all, this is a place mired in lore and legend. Writer William Wallace mentions Stirling Castle as the place of court for the legendary King Arthur. The Romans had at one time fortified the castle hill. Saint Monena founded a chapel on the grounds. Mary, Queen of Scots, was crowned here. My feet were walking the same grounds as history's kings and queens had, and revolutionaries like William Wallace as well. It is a little overwhelming for me as someone who comes from a place where there are few buildings over 150 years old. And as a lifelong reader of histories as well as the fantasy genre, you can almost imagine knights on the battlements and maybe even the faraway sounds of dragons flying through the clouds, seeking a perch along one of the castle walls. There is magic in this place. in the blink of an eye, our time at Stirling Castle was over. Heading back down the hill to the bus, we passed through a churchyard cemetery, solemn and beautiful both at the same time. A pyramid monument called the Star Pyramid and gardens are located on one side, created by evangelist William Drummond in 1863. He encased a Bible and the Confession of Faith within the pyramid. Have I mentioned that an hour wasn't nearly enough time? Probably too much. I will someday have to return to this fascinating place.
Will I come back and see